Hello, everybody. So this is Miss Bender, and we are going to start the endocrine system. Right? This is your video for objectives 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That should give us a good place to start on your endocrine system. So we're going to get going. Those are the objectives in y'all's note-taking guides. I'll make sure I let you know when we're hopping from objective to objective and all that kind of good stuff. So let's get going. Right? So we start with, I believe, what is chapter 17. It may not be in this textbook set. For your endocrine system. Right? So the purpose of your endocrine system is to be able to send messages in one-way communication in your body. Your endocrine system just picks up on the status of things currently. It doesn't need to maintain a phone conversation of contact, if that makes sense. So it's another way your body works to communicate within itself. In A&P1, you guys learned about the nervous system, because that was the main way your body communicates amongst itself. So we left off with the nervous system at the very end of A&P1. Now you guys are in A&P2, and we are hitting the endocrine system, the second method of communication. Right? So both systems are systems that help you coordinate and integrate information and instructions for what your body needs to do and how to do it. But how they function and what they function with is vastly different. Your endocrine system, for example, doesn't actually send a direct signal to the organs that need to act upon it. It sends signals via chemicals called hormones. It bypasses the nervous system entirely, so no signal that comes out of your endocrine system ever touches your nerves or needs to travel through them. And it just does other things. For example, right? Your body detects your own blood pressure so you don't give yourself a heart attack most of the time. The adrenal gland is the gland that responds to blood pressure. Aldosterone is the main hormone that you use to control blood pressure. And so your adrenal glands will detect your blood pressure and then make aldosterone if needed. And that will affect your kidneys, the collecting ducts within your kidneys and how they function. We'll get into specifics of these later when we talk about specific hormones. The main things you guys need to know, and this is objective number 1, compare and contrast hormonal and neural controls in the body. Right? You learned that with your nervous system, it's going to respond to stimulus immediately, or almost immediately, because remember, nervous system is electrical impulses through your nerves. And it's going to help build up your system rather than just maintain it. Right? We're talking about the engineers that designed a car versus the maintenance men that you take it to the shop and that help you maintain your car. Sort of the difference between your nervous and endocrine systems. One of them is the engineers, that would be your nervous system. The maintenance men would be endocrine. Right? Your nervous system has a neural pathway by which it communicates, so it has distinct roads, a distinct factory line to travel signals down. It sends its signals via a very specific pathway. And then your responses are immediate with whatever stimuli that are happening imminently or at the moment, right? Your endocrine system is different than that. Your endocrine system will work with your nervous system, but its main goal is to maintain homeostasis. If you don't remember that word from high school biology or from A&P1, homeostasis is basically your body's ability to maintain set functional internal environments. your body's ability to maintain your body temperature. That is homeostasis. We need a higher body temperature to function, so we maintain one in the high 90s or mid 90s. There you go, right? We have to maintain the amount of water that's in our bodies so that we can function. All of that are processes based on homeostasis. And to maintain those things, we do not need nervous system input. Our brains don't have to be calculating everything at the same time to maintain that. That's your endocrine system's job. Your nervous system and brain has outsourced this stuff to the various glands of your nervous system. Hormones, or the glands that we are talking about within your endocrine system, are ductless. That means they do not have a specific pathway like your nervous system did, or does. You don't have specific pathways like a highway that signals have to travel down like your nervous system. Your endocrine system produces hormones, and the hormones are literally just released into your body via the bloodstream, and they float system-wide through your entire body to influence everything. This also influences your metabolic activity, meaning your endocrine system is going to either speed up or slow down bodily functions based upon what you need. So because it is ductless, this means that the endocrine system is system-wide. It affects your metabolism, and we know it maintains homeostasis by doing this. The other key difference, which is probably the biggest difference between your endocrine system and your nervous system, is that your endocrine system responds slowly, but the responses last longer. So the best way to compare and contrast these last 2 points about your systems, with your nervous system, you're sending signals electronically. You get hungry, you get up in the middle of the night, you try to walk over, sneak into the kitchen, and lo and behold, you stub your toe on the counter. That response is immediate. The stimuli was you stubbing your little toe. You immediately felt pain because a nervous signal went from little toe up to your brain, which made you release a few choice cuss words in the middle of the night, because you feel as though you have just severed your toe from your soul. And then after that pain has gone away, the response is done. The stimuli is done. Pain over. You're done. You stubbed your toe, you lived, you moved on. On the flip side of things, your endocrine system to maintain your body is going to be slow, but the responses last longer and are usually permanent. So puberty is the best example of this. It's not like when you're 11 years old, something in your brain just said, we should go through puberty now. You hit a light switch, and then all of a sudden you went from child to a sexually capable adult. That wasn't a light switch. You didn't just flip a switch and have it happen. Your body decided, we have enough resources now to undergo puberty and become a sexually active adult from a child. You built up your hormones, and over the course of your painfully slow middle school life, you went through puberty and the awkwardness of discovering acne and your voice changing, and if you're a woman, you started your period, and you went through the years of awkwardness from 6th to 9th grade for all of that. But that change that took much slower to do has lasted your entire life. You can't go backwards against puberty. You cannot say, I don't like this, and reverse it. You are now a full-grown adult. You cannot go back to being a tiny child. The response will last a lifetime because now you are an adult. Right? For the purposes of us learning about this, right, we need to know a couple of quirks first. You do indeed have endocrine and exocrine glands. They do exist. we are focusing on the endocrine ones for this unit. So some parts of your chapter in your book will mention exocrine glands. You don't have to worry about those. We aren't talking about those. An example of endocrine versus exocrine, basically the difference is your endocrine glands secrete hormones and produce the chemicals that go directly into your bloodstream, whereas exocrine glands have ductwork and are secreting their byproducts into a specific location. So the difference between this, for example, within your digestive system, your thyroid gland controls your metabolism and how fast you burn energy, so that can control how hungry and how often you get hungry. Thyroid gland is endocrine because it's maintaining your metabolism. The salivary glands you have in your cheeks are exocrine. Their stimulus is you putting sugar or some other sugary, starchy food byproduct in your mouth and chewing, and then your salivary glands produce saliva and squirt it out directly through your cheeks into your mouth, where you start chewing and digesting your food. We are not worried about exocrine glands for this unit. We are only talking about endocrine, so if you are going through your textbooks, anything that's talking about exocrine glands, go ahead and skip that for this unit. You don't need to know it. Right. So this brings us to objective number 3. Yes, I know I skipped number 2. We'll go over number 2 as a brief overview of the glands and hormones you need to know from your body when we get there. That'll be your next lesson. I'll start with that, and then we'll go over your pituitaries. So your objective number 3 is compare and contrast hormones, paracrines, and autocrines. So what's a hormone? This is why this unit can be more difficult for some students. For many of the units in the human body, we can point to things and say, this is this part, this is that part. This is how that functions. Right? But we are talking about chemicals instead of body parts being the byproduct of things here. So it can get a little bit confusing and not fun for some people. Right? A hormone is a chemical that basically travels through your bloodstream until it can act on a target organ or a target cell. Something you need to know about hormones is they are specific to their target organ and target cells. I'm going to oversimplify this explanation a little bit, and we can get a little bit more into this as we start discussing specifics. But for those of you that have had organic chemistry and other things, this is going to be remarkably oversimplified and you'll know it. However, chemistry was not a prerequisite for A&P 2. So I will explain this in a way so everybody can understand it. And if you have any questions, feel free to come to me and ask them. I'm just giving you that heads up with the chemistry because I know that chemistry was not a prerequisite. I know that some of the other anatomy teachers really love going in depth into this awesome chemical reactions, but I know that some of you guys won't even take chemistry until next year or next semester for your prerequisites, and I don't want you guys to be at a disadvantage. You guys remember from A&P 1 that each cell in our body had a plasma cell membrane on the outside of it, and that there are proteins all along these cell membranes that identify the cells and that interact with things outside the cell on behalf of the cell. Those are called receptor proteins. Hormones travel through your bloodstream and travel through your body until they find the cells that have the receptor proteins that they fit into like a puzzle piece. Most chemistry and most chemical compounds work together because they can fit together like puzzle pieces. That's at the most basic level how they are interacting and what they are doing best. So this cell here, which has 2 little triangle receptors, would be able to interact with this triangle hormone or hormone B. But hormone B cannot interact with this cell because it only has circle receptors for hormone A, your little circle here. So you may have some cells that can interact with both, like this one in the middle. It has the little hormone B receptor and the hormone A receptor. And then other cells will only interact with one or the other. So this one can only interact with target B, and this one can only interact with target A. If you've ever wondered why things are like that, once again think of puberty. When you went through puberty, parts of your body changed, but other parts did not. It's not like estrogen told your entire body, like, widen and get bigger. Estrogen, for our young ladies, made your hips get wider so you could bear children. It did not make your toes get wider. Your toes were unchanged. None of the cells in your toes had hormone receptors for estrogen to make the estrogen widen your hips or begin to grow your breast tissue. Your toes were unaffected. Same deal with most other hormones. Hormones are going to respond to the cells that are meant to receive those messages, not with other ones. So hormones are responsible and specific for who they're contacting. Within the realm or world of hormones, right, you have a couple of other things called autocrines and paracrines. If you guys remember your Greek stems, which are a nifty thing to look up and learn because they are very, very helpful. An auto means self, so automobile is a mobile or movement device for yourself. An autocrine is a hormone or chemical that is exerted to affect the same effect on the same type of cells. So that means an autocrine here, is a chemical that is secreted by the same cells that they affect. A good example of an autocrine up here would be your stomach cells, right? You stuff food in your face, chew it up and swallow, and your stomach cells here detect that, oh, we need to create stomach acid. And then they create an autocrine that then sends messages to themselves that say, hey, as long as I am making this, make more stomach acid, right? That is what an autocrine does. It is a chemical that is made by the cell to stimulate the cell itself. So your stomach basically amps itself up to make more stomach acid to help you digest things. On the flip side of things, a paracrine is a chemical that will act locally, but it's going to affect cell types other than the ones that release the chemical. So for your paracrine message, you will also have other cells within your body that say, hey, we need to do a job. So we need to clean up and then regrow the skin around this paper cut. So the cells around the cut will start releasing paracrines to the cells that are next to them, which will trigger the cells that are next to them to start growing and doing their thing to heal you from the paper cut. Your stomach also does this with stomach acid and digestion, and based upon what it needs to digest, we'll get into your digestive system later. But this is what a paracrine does. You have one cell that assumes responsibility for some stuff, releases these chemical signals, and then the next door neighbors are put into effect. So an autocrine is you taking care of your own house and taking care of your business. The paracrine is like neighborhood watch. It doesn't care about anything that's outside its realm of neighborhood, but it will send signals to the rest of the neighborhood saying, hey, there's been this sketchy dude driving up and down the streets. Like, beware, right? For the purposes of this unit, all you had to do was be able to compare and contrast regular hormones, paracrines, and autocrines. We're not actually going to talk any more about autocrines and paracrines for the rest of this unit. We may mention them in their units specific to what we're talking about, like immune, digestive, that kind of thing. But You only had to know their definitions for your endocrine system unit. That's all you need to know for this objective. Right? You don't need to go any more in depth into autocrines and paracrines. We're not going to touch them. This brings us to objective number 4. Discuss the 2 major chemical classifications of hormones and describe the implication of each. So I have simplified this down a bit further for you than what the PowerPoint does. And the reason why I've done that is because if you guys remember in biology, amino acids are the building blocks of proteins and whatnot, and they stack together like little Legos. If you learned that from basic biology. When you have a chain of amino acids, they are called a peptide chain. So realistically, peptide hormones that your PowerPoint lists as separate and amino acid hormones are the same thing, but peptide hormones are larger and bigger chemicals than amino acid hormones. Right? So, but they have the same functionality, so I kind of smushed them together into one thing. What you guys need to know is you got 2 main classes of hormones. A, amino acid-based hormones. So amino acid-based hormones. And B, steroid hormones. Huzzah! Right? So your examples of these, right? So your amino acid-based hormones, you're going to have amines, thyroxine, which is what your thyroid makes. Peptides and other protein-based hormones are all what your amino acid-based hormones are. Steroid hormones are synthesized from cholesterol. That means steroid-based hormones are made from a type of fat or lipid. So amino acid-based hormones are made from proteins. Steroid-based hormones are made from lipids and cholesterol or fats. Right? Within your steroids, you have a couple of other classifications that we can talk about. Let's see. Right. You have sex hormones or gonadal hormones. These hormones are things like testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, or androgens, like this androstenedione. You do not need to know that name. Don't remember that. Don't freak out about it. The main 3 gonadal steroidal hormones you guys need to know would be testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone. Right? And yes, all of our bodies make a little bit of all of those. Right? And that's a good thing, right? Estrogen actually absorbs into your fat cells and helps do some other things in your body, such as chill out other hormones and give you better skin and smooth things out. It softens some things, and it works better with fat storage, right? So even men have a little bit of estrogen. Testosterone is needed because it helps build muscle mass and also gives you a sex drive. So yes, ladies, even we have some testosterone in our bodies because we need a little bit of a sex drive too, because let's be honest, biologically, if half of your population did not want to ever reproduce, your species would be in trouble, right? So even we have a little bit of testosterone in us, so we can build muscles and so we can have a sex drive, and men also have a little bit of estrogen in them for the other purposes and functions of estrogen in the body. Like, we all make a little bit of it. The difference is the proportions that we make. Right. Steroid-based hormones are also going to get into adrenal cortical. Right? So we can kind of summarize what is in this pink and red blocks here in one word, which is adrenocortical. And some examples of adrenocortical hormones would be corticosterone, aldosterone. You know stuff like this more as cortisol because you can buy it over the counter. It makes you not itch if you're having an allergic reaction to like poison ivy. Renin, we'll talk about that later. Adrenaline is another good one. You guys know what adrenaline is. But that all gets lopped into this adrenocortical method of steroidal hormones. If you want to be a little bit more specific in how they are functioning, your steroid-based hormones, right? They go in through the lipid-soluble membrane of your cell. They end up binding to some other receptors in the cytoplasm of the cell. They end up getting down into the nucleus, and then they help your nucleus transcribe mRNA, which is then translated into new proteins that your cell will make. So steroid-based hormones basically hack their way from your bloodstream into the nucleus of your cells and then make your nucleus start producing new proteins for your body to create. Right? These are all amino acid-based hormones, and I am going to tell you now, looking at this PowerPoint, because we are talking about chemicals, it gives you a lot of pretty pictures like this of chemicals. You're not going to see those on any tests from me. This is not a chemistry class. If you have taken organic chemistry, this is more than just a picture to decorate the PowerPoint and that sort of information. But like this stuff, I'm not your chemistry teacher. I'm not telling you to interpret chemical signals. So when you see things like this, don't panic. Right? But other amino acid hormones, you have tyrosine, which is producing thyroid hormone, as you can see here. This is what the T3 and T4 are. T4 is thyroxine. T4 is triiodinothyronine. We're going to refer to those as T3 and T3 and T4 when we start discussing your thyroid gland and that sort of thing. But here's your mechanism for amino acid or peptide hormones, right? They are water soluble, they get into the cell membranes, they activate some proteins, or G protein specifically, on the cell membrane. They're going to activate some secondary messengers within the cytoplasm, and they basically work within the cytoplasm to put together your additional proteins and that sort of thing. But your peptide hormones don't really mess with your nucleus and your DNA. Right. This brings us to objective number 5. Describe 2 mechanisms that facilitate hormonal effect in target tissues. Right? You have 2 mechanisms for this, and they are more simple than you think they are, or than this PowerPoint leads you to believe. You have water-soluble hormones and lipid-soluble hormones. So water-soluble hormones are all of your amino acid-based hormones except for the thyroid hormones. They're going to act on receptors in the plasma membrane like I just showed you. And they're going to react to help build proteins and do other things within the cytoplasm using the G proteins to get in. Lipid-soluble hormones, right, would be your steroid-based hormones and your thyroid hormones. Are going to act on receptors inside of the cell, which are going to basically break into your nucleus and start building more DNA. That is how these 2 different types of hormones can react and work with things. That's what you need to know. Right? So this brings us, this is more chemical, complicated information. Here we go. Right? This brings us to objective number 6. List 3 ways that different hormones interact if they are acting on the same target cell. Right? Your 3 basic ways that hormones can interact amongst themselves would be permissiveness, synergism, or antagonism. Right? We're going to talk about permissivism, or the permissive ones, first. Right? One hormone cannot exert its full effects without another hormone being present. That's what permissive is. It needs permission. So a good example of this one, right? A good example of this one would be your reproductive system hormones, right? So you will never have your full reproductive system do its full job with only one hormone present. It needs another hormone there with the target organ to respond to stimuli. So this is like, you're not going to ever go to a bar alone. You need a friend with you, and then you will go to the bar to have a drink, right? You're not going to go to the bar alone, but you have a friend there that acts as sort of like your permission to go into the bar and have a good time because you don't want to act alone, right? Right. So permissive effects. You need more than one hormone for one hormone to act. Once again, an example of this would be your reproductive system hormones regulate different aspects of the reproductive system, but thyroid hormone, which controls your metabolism, is necessary for normal, timely development of your reproductive system. Because for simple biology reasons, if your thyroid controls your metabolism. If you are not eating enough, you're starving to death, and you're too hungry, you're not going to trigger your reproductive system because your body biologically assumes if I can't take care of myself, I'm not going to be able to carry a child, right? So thyroid hormone, which helps with growth and development and controls your metabolism, is necessary to develop your reproductive system. If you don't have thyroid hormone, it's going to delay a child's reproductive system development or prolong when they start puberty. You need thyroid hormone as a permission in order to begin developing your reproductive hormones. Right? Synergism or synergistic effects. This is when two hormones are going to act together to produce an effect that is better than what they could have done alone. So with synergism, just like with synergy, right? You can do your job alone and your coworker can do their job alone. But when the two of you work on the same job together, the job is done better and faster than it would have been if both of you had had the project solo, right? So synergism is the same deal. You have more than one hormone that produces the exact same effect on a target cell, but the two of them are acting together, so they combine their forces and everything is amplified. A good example of this would be glucagon from your pancreas and then epinephrine from your adrenal glands, right? Glucagon is what your pancreas is the hormone and signal your pancreas sends to your liver saying, hey, our blood sugar is low. We need to break down some fat so we can get some blood sugar up in this body, right? Epinephrine is your fight or flight response. That's the one that says we're about to fight a bear or we need to run from the bear to live. We need energy for that. Get us some sugar, right? So epinephrine will also make your liver start releasing glucose into the blood and breaking down fat. Right? When the two of those mighty hormones combine, right, the amount of glucose that is released into your bloodstream is about 150% of what would have just been released if you got scared and had a surge of fight or flight epinephrine, or if you were a little bit hungry and your pancreas said, hey, I'm sending glucagon, go get me some energy, right? If the two work together, the effect on your body is 150% more sugar released back into the bloodstream because you had multiple things freaking you out and panicking. They amplified the liver's response together. And then you have antagonistic effects. If you remember from your English class, the antagonist is normally the bad guy of the story. So the antagonist is something that's going to work against one another. So bluntly, with an antagonist, you have one hormone that opposes or does the opposite action of another hormone, right? An example of this, once again, we're going to use glucagon from our synergistic talks. Glucagon tells your liver, hey, we have low blood sugar. Start breaking down some fat so we can get some, sugar in our blood. Insulin is the opposite. Insulin tells your cells to absorb sugar from the blood because you have plenty of sugar in your blood. So insulin is going to essentially lower your blood sugar levels, and glucagon is essentially going to raise your blood sugar levels. The two of them do the opposite job. They are antagonistic to one another. There is one more factor that I would like to discuss that's not actually one of your objectives, because you went over this way back in A&P1. But I'm going to review it here because I'm going to be passively referencing this for the rest of the time that we are discussing specific hormones and how they react to your body. And now is a good time to review this stuff from A&P1. This is extra information about the 3 things we just went over. Right? And I would like to remind you guys about feedback mechanisms in your body. This is super fast, straightforward, right? So negative feedback systems are basically when you have, this is the majority, like 90% of your hormones. So you'll be hearing the phrase negative feedback loop quite frequently, right? So you have the synthesis and release of most hormones are regulated by some type of negative feedback mechanism. Negative feedback means your body's response was to stop the process. It's negative, it wants to stop it, right? So a negative feedback example here is you got hungry, so you are stuffing your face with that hamburger, right? So you're eating, and your stomach is doing its job in absorbing the nutrients and the sugar from the food and the proteins and other such. And because of that, you are just eating, so you have slightly spiked blood sugar, right? And because you have slightly spiked blood sugar, you have a high blood sugar glucose level is detected by your pancreas, so your pancreas is going to start releasing insulin, so your cells will take up more sugar. So your pancreas, because it detected that you just ate, right, releases insulin. You take you release insulin, it goes throughout the rest of your body, going to absorb the nutrients, right? Most of your body cells also take up glucose and that kind of thing, and then your blood sugar levels go back to where they normally were. So your pancreas is like, all right, we fixed it, we're done, we're over, right? So you ate something, and your pancreas was like, oh no, now we have too much nutrients, we have to make the body absorb this. It released its hormone that made your body absorb the energy. You were back to normal glucose levels, pancreas shuts off, you're done. That's your negative feedback loop. Stimulus happened, body responded, or body created hormone to respond to it. Body responded, stimulus ended. Right? That is negative feedback. A positive feedback loop is different. There is one major hormone that is your positive feedback mechanism for your body. And there is a comic that describes what a positive feedback loop is so much better than I could. So I'm going to give it some credit while I quote it to you. This comic is called Hyperbole and a Half. You've seen her as a meme. I know you have. It's an older meme at this point, but she still exists. And in her journey moving cross-country, in her comic that she draws in MS Paint, she describes her simple dog who whines when nervous, and her helper dog, the one who panics when things change, as the simple dog makes a high-pitched whining noise all through the night and was still going strong the next morning. When we were loading the dogs up into the car to continue the move, the constant high-pitched whining sound emanating from the simple dog finally broke the helper dog. The helper dog wailed in anguish from the sound, which then alarmed the simple dog. In her surprise, the simple dog started yelping, which further upset the helper dog and made the helper dog bark. And so it continued in a wretched positive feedback loop of completely unnecessary noise. That's what a positive feedback loop is. If you don't want to think about two dogs whining back and forth and startling each other, think of it as a baby and a dog. You bring your newborn baby home for the first time, baby starts to cry for whatever reason. Your dog is not used to hearing the sound of a baby cry, so your dog starts to bark. The dog barking startles the baby, and then the baby starts to cry louder because the dog scared the baby, which then makes the dog bark and whine even louder because the dog doesn't know what's going on. That is a positive feedback loop of noise. Right? So I will give credit for this example to hyperbole and a half. I know you've seen that meme before, but that's what a positive feedback loop is. Instead of creating a hormone to stop a stimulation, it amplifies it. This is what happens during childbirth and what oxytocin does to your body if we're talking about hormones. So you have mom-to-be here with baby whose head is dropping and who's about to give birth. When she starts going into labor, her body will release oxytocin, which will start to contract the uterus and cause her to go into labor. So she has created oxytocin. Her muscles are contracting. Like, messages get sent to the pituitary, which is where oxytocin comes from. Oxytocin is then sent back down to the uterus and checkbox, is there still a baby here? Oh, the answer is yes. Send the signal back up to the brain. Yes, there's still a baby here. We need to get it out, get more. Brain sends more oxytocin. You have, it gets back down to the uterus. Your contractions are getting more frequently and more, they're getting harder, longer, and more frequent. Baby is still in there. Message sent back up to your brain. Make more oxytocin. We need more of this. So your brain keeps making more oxytocin over and over and over and over and over again until finally, right, sends signal back and it discovers that, hey, you've given birth, right? The cervix has been stretched. There's no longer anything up in there. And then you stop making oxytocin. And, your body backs off on it, so you stop labor. This is a positive feedback loop because it is amplifying your body's response and continuing it until the stimulus is gone. So instead of fixing a problem and ending a problem, which is what negative feedback loop did, positive feedback loop amplifies the response and keeps it going longer and stronger until there is no more problem. Right? So this is a positive feedback loop, but this is pretty much your only positive feedback loop as far as hormones and signals go. Most of what we're going to be discussing in class is going to be a negative feedback loop. But you learned about your positive and negative feedback loops way back in Anatomy A&P 1 and 2, so now is a good time to tell you about these before we move on and start discussing specific hormones, which will be for next time. I think this video is long enough for you now, and we've gone over, 5 different objectives for you? So that's enough for your brain today. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. And I'll be in contact with you guys soon.